On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport bound for Beijing. On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew members. It was a routine red-eye flight scheduled to land 6 hours later. The Boeing 777 was one of the safest aircraft ever built, with an impeccable safety record. The weather was clear, the plane was in perfect condition. At 1:19 a.m., less than 40 minutes after takeoff, the co-pilot radioed air traffic control with a standard message, "Good night, Malaysian 370. It was the last anyone ever heard from the aircraft. Minutes later, Flight 370 disappeared from radar screens. No distress call, no emergency signal, no wreckage. 239 people and one of the most sophisticated machines ever built simply vanished into the night. What followed was the most expensive search operation in aviation history, spanning years and covering millions of square miles of ocean. And yet, a decade later, we still don't know what happened. This is the story of the greatest mystery in modern aviation. The first sign something was wrong came at 1:21 a.m. when Flight 370's transponder, the device that broadcasts a plane's location, altitude, and identification, stopped transmitting. Air traffic controllers in Kuala Lumpur noticed the plane had disappeared from their screens, but they assumed it was a technical glitch or that the aircraft had passed into Vietnamese airspace. They waited. Minutes passed. Vietnamese controllers called, asking where the plane was. It hadn't arrived in their airspace. Confusion turned to concern. Concern turned to alarm. By 2:40 a.m., more than an hour after the last contact, Malaysian authorities declared an emergency. Search and rescue teams were scrambled, but they had no idea where to look. The plane had simply vanished. In the age of GPS, satellite tracking, and instant communication, a massive commercial airliner, 230 feet long, weighing over 300 tons, had disappeared without a trace. It seemed impossible, but it had happened. In the hours that followed, investigators began piecing together the plane's final movements. What they discovered was shocking. Flight 370 hadn't crashed shortly after takeoff. It had continued flying for hours. Military radar showed that after the transponder shut off, the plane made a sharp turn to the west, flying back across Malaysia and out over the Andaman Sea. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. Someone had turned the plane around. Satellite data from a British company called Inmarsat revealed even more. The plane's engines had continued sending automated handshake signals to a satellite for more than 6 hours after it disappeared from radar. These signals didn't include location data, but engineers could analyze them to estimate the plane's path. The analysis suggested Flight 370 had flown south, deep into the southern Indian Ocean, one of the most remote and inhospitable regions on Earth. And then, around 8:19 a.m., the signals stopped. The plane had run out of fuel. Somewhere in that vast emptiness, Flight 370 had gone down. The search began in earnest. Ships, planes, and submarines from dozens of countries converged on the southern Indian Ocean. It was an area roughly the size of California, with ocean depths reaching over 13,000 feet. The conditions were brutal, towering waves, freezing temperatures, and underwater terrain more rugged than the Himalayas. For weeks, searchers found nothing. Then, in April 2014, Australian authorities detected underwater signals consistent with an aircraft's black box. Hope surged. But when submarines reached the location, there was nothing there. The signals had been a false lead, possibly from the search equipment itself. Months passed, the search area was expanded, refined, expanded again. Autonomous underwater vehicles scanned the ocean floor, mapping terrain never before seen by humans. They found shipwrecks, underwater volcanoes, and ancient geological formations, but no sign of Flight 370. By January 2015, Malaysian authorities officially declared the disappearance an accident and all passengers and crew presumed dead. But they still had no idea what had happened. Then in July 2015, something washed ashore on Reunion Island, a French territory in the western Indian Ocean, more than 3,000 miles from the search area. A man walking on the beach found a large piece of debris, a barnacle-encrusted section of an aircraft wing called a flaperon. Investigators examined it and confirmed what many had suspected. It was from Flight 370. Finally, physical evidence. Over the next few years, more debris washed up on beaches across the Indian Ocean, fragments of the wing, interior panels, a piece of the landing gear, even a seat cushion. Each piece was analyzed and many were confirmed to be from the missing plane. The debris told a story. Flight 370 had broken apart on impact with the ocean, and the wreckage had been scattered by currents across thousands of miles. But the debris also deepened the mystery, because if pieces of the plane were washing ashore, why couldn't anyone find the main wreckage? Where was the fuselage? Where were the black boxes that would reveal what happened in the cockpit? Theories exploded. Some believed it was a mechanical failure, a catastrophic decompression, or electrical fire that incapacitated the crew and caused the plane to fly on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. But this didn't explain the deliberate turn, the transponder being shut off, or the plane's erratic flight path. Others suspected hijacking. Perhaps terrorists had seized the plane intending to use it as a weapon, but were thwarted and the plane crashed. But there was no claim of responsibility, no evidence of a struggle, and no motive. Then there was the theory that chilled investigators' most deliberate action by the pilot. Captain Zaharie Ahmad Shah was an experienced pilot with over 18,000 flight hours. He was respected, loved flying, and had a flight simulator at home. But investigators discovered he'd been going through personal problems. His marriage was troubled, and he was reportedly depressed. On his home simulator, they found a flight path eerily similar to the one Flight 370 took, flying south into the Indian Ocean until fuel ran out. Had the captain deliberately crashed the plane in a mass murder-suicide? The pilot-suicide theory gained traction, but it was never proven. Zaharie's family and friends vehemently denied it, insisting he would never harm anyone. Malaysian authorities were reluctant to publicly accuse him without definitive proof. And there were other possibilities. The co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid, was younger and less experienced. Could he have been responsible? Or was there someone else in the cockpit, a hijacker, a stowaway, someone with access who shouldn't have been there? Investigator examined the passenger list. Most were Chinese nationals returning home. There were also 2 Iranian men traveling on stolen passports, which initially raised suspicions of terrorism. But Interpol determined they were asylum seekers trying to reach Europe, not terrorists. Every lid seemed to evaporate under scrutiny. And without the black boxes, the flight data recorder, and cockpit voice recorder, there was no way to know what happened in those final hours. The ocean had swallowed the truth. In 2018, after 4 years and over $150 million spent, the official search was called off. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, which had led the effort, concluded that the plane was likely in the southern Indian Ocean, but the exact location remained unknown. The search had covered 46,000 square miles of ocean floor, the most extensive underwater search in history, and found nothing. Families of the passengers and crew were devastated. They had waited years for answers, for closure, for the remains of their loved ones. And now they were being told the search was over. Some refused to accept it. Private companies offered to continue the search on a no-fine, no-fee basis. One American firm, Ocean Infinity, launched a new search in 2018 using cutting-edge underwater drones. They searched for months, covering an additional 43,000 square miles. But once again, they found nothing. In 2018, Malaysia released a final report on the investigation. It was 1,500 pages long and concluded with a frustrating admission: we are unable to determine the real cause for the disappearance. But some investigators refused to give up. Independent researchers, aviation experts, and amateur sleuths pored over the data, running simulations, analyzing drift patterns of debris, and proposing new search areas. One British engineer named Richard Godfrey used a novel technique involving radio wave disturbances to track the plane's path. His analysis suggested a specific location in the southern Indian Ocean where the wreckage might be. In 2021, he published his findings and they gained international attention. Ocean Infinity expressed interest in searching the area, but as of now, no new search has been launched. The mystery remains unsolved, and the families continue to wait. Some have moved on, finding ways to live with the uncertainty. Others remain consumed by the need to know. One Chinese woman whose mother was on the flight said, "I don't need to see her body. I just need to know what happened. I need the truth." The disappearance of Flight 370 exposed uncomfortable truths about modern aviation. We assume that in the 21st century, with satellites, GPS, and advanced technology, it's impossible to lose a plane. But Flight 370 proved otherwise. Commercial aircraft don't continuously transmit their location. If a transponder is turned off, the plane becomes nearly invisible. Black boxes have limited battery life, just 30 days, and can only be detected within a few miles. And the oceans are vast, deep, and largely unmapped. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the bottom of our own oceans. Flight 370 also revealed vulnerabilities in cockpit security. If the pilot or co-pilot wants to take control and disable safety systems, there's little anyone can do to stop them. Since MH370, some changes have been made: real-time tracking systems, longer-lasting black box batteries, and improved protocols. But the fundamental problem remains: if someone with access wants to make a plane disappear, they can. There's a haunting aspect to this story that goes beyond the technical mystery. 239 people were on that plane. They had lives, families, dreams. There was a group of Chinese artists traveling to an exhibition, a couple on their honeymoon, engineers, students, children. One passenger had posted on social media just before boarding, excited about the trip. Another had texted family saying they'd call when they landed. None of them knew they were boarding a plane that would never arrive, and their families have been left in a nightmare of uncertainty. In most tragedies, there's a finality. A crash site remains, a place to mourn. But the families of MH370 have nothing. No graves, no closure, just an endless, agonizing question: what happened? Some cling to hope that their loved ones somehow survived, that the plane landed somewhere remote and they're still alive. It's irrational, but grief doesn't follow logic. Others have accepted death, but desperately need to understand why. The not knowing is, in some ways, worse than any answer could be. Conspiracy theories have flourished in the absence of answers. Some believe the plane was shot down by military forces and covered up. Others think it was hijacked and flown to a secret location. Diego Garcia, Kazakhstan, even North Korea. There are theories involving cargo. The plane was carrying lithium batteries and other materials. Some claim these caught fire or were targeted. There are theories involving espionage, that someone on board had valuable intelligence or technology that others wanted. Some even claim the plane was remotely hijacked using cyber warfare. Most of these theories have been debunked or are unsupported by evidence. But they persist because the official explanation that the plane flew for hours and crashed in the ocean for unknown reasons feels incomplete. It doesn't satisfy our need for narrative, for motive, for meaning. And so people fill the void with speculation, each theory more elaborate than the last. The truth is probably simpler and more tragic, but without evidence, we'll never know. In 2024, 10 years after the disappearance, memorial services were held around the world. Families gathered to remember their loved ones and to demand that the search continue. Some governments have expressed willingness to fund a new search if credible new evidence emerges. Technology has advanced. AI, better sonar, improved drift modeling. There's hope that what was impossible in 2014 might be achievable now, but hope has been disappointed before. The ocean is vast, and the wreckage could be buried under silt, broken into pieces too small to detect, or scattered across an area too large to search. It's possible that Flight 370 will never be found, that it will remain one of history's great unsolved mysteries, like Amelia Earhart's disappearance or the fate of the Mary Celeste. And perhaps in a century, people will look back on our time and wonder how, with all our technology, we could lose a plane and 239 people without a trace. There's a room in Kuala Lumpur where personal belongings of the passengers are stored, luggage that was checked but never claimed, items left in the terminal, things meant to be reunited with their owners in Beijing. They sit in a warehouse, tagged and cataloged, waiting for people who will never come back. It's a haunting image, suitcases full of clothes, gifts, souvenirs from trips never completed, lives interrupted mid-sentence. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is more than an aviation mystery. It's a reminder of how fragile our sense of control is, how quickly the ordinary can become incomprehensible, and how the modern world, for all its technology and connectivity, still contains spaces where people can vanish without a trace. Somewhere in the Indian Ocean, at a depth where sunlight never reaches, where the pressure would crush a human instantly, the wreckage of Flight 370 likely rests. And with it, the answers to what happened on that March night in 2014. Until it's found, the mystery endures, and 239 families continue to wait for the truth.